Plato is probably one of the most famous philosophers and important philosophers of all time. Plato's ideas played an essential role in forming our basic ideas about philosophy that we know about today in Western philosophy specifically. Since he was so close to Socrates, being his student, he learned a lot from Socrates and wrote down a lot of stuff. He compiled all these writings and dialogues into a book called The Republic. Republic basically had most of the dialogues that he had with Socrates and with other people. Including in these dialogues, he had one of his most famous allegories, which is the allegory of the cave. But before we get to explain the allegory of the cave, we have to discuss why Plato thought it was so important to make this allegory and to talk about it with people. So as we know nowadays, many people think philosophy is a waste of time. They think you're just kind of speculating about questions that you can't answer, and you're not really going to get anything out of it. So might as well just move on. It's kind of an ancient sort of study, sort of waste of time. But Plato back in the day believed that philosophy is just as important as learning math, English, and any other subject. He believed in order to have a nice, fulfilling life, you'd have to really dive deep into your philosophical thoughts and question everything about reality. Because of this opinion that philosophy is so important that Plato held, this influenced him to make the allegory of the cave in order to show how important philosophy is, in order to visually demonstrate it, logically demonstrate it, and how it would affect people if they didn't care about philosophy. So let's get into what the allegory actually is. In his book, The Republic, he describes this cave where multiple prisoners are chained to a wall ever since they're born. These prisoners don't know anything else except the shadowy, dark, dimly lit place, the cave that they live in. Now in this cave, since they're chained to the walls, they can't turn their head or to look around anywhere else. They just have to stare at a wall that is very dimly lit by a fire behind them. Now with this fire, there's also a group of people that are moving objects around in front of the fire in order to cast the shadow on the wall that is in front of the people. So because of the fact that these people haven't seen anything else outside the cave, they believe that these shadows that they're seeing on the walls are the real thing. So when they see a shadow of a dog, they think that's a dog. They think they have the full idea of a dog. Right there is that shadow on the wall. Of course, this is entirely false, but the prisoners don't know any better. They haven't had anyone tell them anything. They haven't had anyone reveal to them the truth of the universe and the truth outside the cave. Eventually, though, Plato keeps describing the situation, and he goes on to say that one of the prisoners gets free, and he ventures outside and sees the real world. He sees the grass, the trees, the vibrant colors of the sky, and the birds flying around. And when he first exits this cave, his eyes sting because of the bright light from the sun. He observes everything throughout the day and even goes on to look at the sky at nighttime and look at all the stars in the sky. And he eventually realizes how vast the cosmos is, and it's not, his reality isn't just confined within this cave anymore. He realizes there's more out there. There is these true ideas that are the essential forms of what they're being represented as shadows in the cave. So after this, he goes back down to the cave to tell his fellow prisoners that this is the real reality of how the world is. He describes to them the trees and the colors and all the different characteristics that he observed outside. Since these prisoners have never seen the outside world, they think he's crazy. They think he's saying something insane. Just tell him that he's crazy and that this is all there is. There's these shadows in front of us, and that's what really exists. The prisoner that was free, that got to look outside the cave, keeps going and keeps telling them, and eventually they get very aggressive. The chained prisoners get very aggressive with the free prisoner. So now that we know what the cave allegory really is, we can analyze it now and see what it really means. In the book Republic, Plato, before he describes the allegory, he states that this allegory is meant to create an image to show our nature in its education and our want of education and our likening to the conditioning of the following kind. Now, what does that even mean? Basically, what Plato is trying to describe here is how we react to new realities and education being shown to us, even when we're in this confined space and have very limited knowledge about the world because of the place we were born and raised and the amount of education that we receive. Now, a big purpose of this, as stated from the beginning of this video, is that Plato wanted to show how important philosophy is, and the freed prisoner is pretty much the philosopher. The person who learns about the nature of the universe by thinking, by observing at the outside world where other people don't look. This also shows a reluctance to learn about vastly different subjects and viewpoints because of the fact that we're so comfortable in the place that we're already at with the knowledge that we already have. And one of the biggest things that Plato wants to talk about here is what we truly believe to be true. So Plato wants to get us questioning, how do we know the reality of things? Are we all just prisoners in this cave where we're seeing these shadow-like interpretations of things? He's also exploring the idea of whether or not we can be able to see the true forms of things in the universe. Now, if you notice, the idea of forms comes up a lot when I'm talking about Plato's ideas. This is because one of Plato's biggest ideas was the idea of forms, is that there's an essence out there that is transcendent, that everything else relies upon. So when you have an apple in the physical world, that is a representation of an idea of an apple. So you could say forms are the truest essence of a thing. Now, these forms that Plato suggests are transcendent. We can't directly observe them. We can only see the physical representations that they bring into the world. But the idea of forms has long been rejected by many philosophers, and it's a very old way of thinking about how the true essence of things. But what is important to today's society about this allegory is the fact of opening our minds to new perspective and being able to listen to other people without being reluctant because we're so comfortable in our own position currently. So this allegory is actually very relatable to today's society, as people tend to get in these echo chambers just like the cave, where they have a very limited perspective of what is happening in the world, and when another perspective comes they try to kind of deny it and get rid of it and abolish it, just like the chained prisoners in the cave tried to do with the freed prisoner that tried to teach them about the new ideas that he came up with. This can also tie into childhood upbringing and the perspective that we're raised with. So say if a child is raised in a very religious family, they're gonna have a very religious view of the world, right? They're gonna view everything they see as complex, as something that God has created. And the same could be true the other way around. A person that's raised in a very atheistic household could grow up and look at everything as a scientific question, right? If they're taught by their parents that everything is natural, everything has an explanation, they keep looking for these explanations every time they look at something. They never invoke any supernatural solution to anything. Another huge thing is social media and how it's being controlled by algorithms to create these echo chambers. So a big idea now is that companies are controlling social medias like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube in order to have the algorithms feed us certain viewpoints, certain political viewpoints that go with our own, in order to create these echo chambers where we have a very limited point of view. You might have noticed this when a particular opposing viewpoint of a political party came into your feed or recommendations all of a sudden, where it made you really quite uncomfortable if they were speaking something that you agreed with. It's basically the type of feeling that these prisoners felt when this freed prisoner came and told them about the real world and different perspective of the world. And lastly, this puts into question the information that we're being fed by these big institutions, these corporations. It really makes us question how much we can trust these institutions and what they're telling us. Now, I'm not saying we should go out there and doubt everything like Descartes did with his existence of the self, and he eventually came down to I think therefore I am. But we can go and do our research on our own, right? We don't have to take anyone's word for anything they say just because they have a PhD or just because they're part of a great institution. I even myself, anytime my teachers say anything, an interesting fact or anything like that, I immediately go on Google and I go into these sources and I read about it. I don't just take the teacher's word, for example. It should be the same with NASA. It should be the same with any scientific field, because there is bias in everything. So finally, after all this, we can see that Plato's allegory of the cave is very useful in today's society, even though it's an ancient allegory. It talks about concepts like misinformation, misguided views on the world, perspectives that are already established in us, opening our mind into new perspectives about the world. And overall, it's just been a very influential allegory to Western philosophy in general. But yeah, that's Plato's cave, and I hope you guys learned something new from this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and drop a like. Comment below. I love comments on this channel. I would love to have all kinds of discussions, philosophical and religious discussions on this channel. So if you have any comments, please comment below. Would love to respond, would love to have a conversation. Thank you guys for watching, and this has been Shared Philosophy.